Hello and welcome to this quick review of the Doctor Who William Hartnell story, The Web Planet. This adventure sees a Doctor and companions Vicky, Barbara and Ian crash land on a mysterious planet where they get involved in the conflict between the Zarbi and the Menoptera. Let's complete a quick analysis of this story and find out whether this story is a hidden gem or a waste of our time. The villain. I'm including the Menoptera in this section because I think they work best here. Despite not being a villain, at first glance people look at the alien, the Menoptera, and make their opinion that this creature is flat out bad based on their costume, which I must admit hasn't held up very well to this day. However, I must disagree with this statement, as I think the Menoptera are actually quite interesting. Looking at their character, they never stop moving and are always moving their arms while they speak. They tend to gesture a lot, and this distinguishes their species from others that we've seen in the first and second series of Classic Who. This story is based around the Menoptera instead of the Doctor and the crew. Are they good enough to get the main role in a 6-part story? In my opinion, no, they're not. I believe this because they aren't developed enough, and every Menoptera seems the same. Their personalities aren't obvious enough, and even though their costume hasn't held up well, it does make me smile. So I'm not going to be taking points away from the Menoptera for their costume. And there's something about them that does make you want to root for them. I must admit their voices do become quite annoying when we get to the 5th and 6th instalment. However, coming to the Zarbi aren't as good as the Menoptera in my opinion. They don't speak and instead make high-pitched noises. This is quite a daring move for a character who can't show emotion in their face. And consequently, I think the lack of emotion and the lack of a voice makes them quite forgettable. Their high-pitched noises do get quite annoying as well. Their leader was actually quite interesting. I really like the voice and I find it quite creepy. But unfortunately, the physical costume was rubbish. For the villains and the aliens, I'm scoring them 5 out of 10. The companions. On the whole, I think they were a disappointment. I really like the companion Barbara and Ian, and the companion Vicky is growing on me at this point. Bear in mind, it's Vicky's 3rd story in the series. This story follows a romance, and I really enjoyed that one, and I thought it was a great character piece, so I had high expectations for this one. Barbara and Ian were so interesting then, but in this story, I thought this was somewhat taken away from them. They didn't have any growth, and this didn't help their characters. Despite the situation being dangerous and stakes were intended to be high, I didn't see this in their performance. They didn't convey any urgency. My favourite part was with the conversation with Barbara and Vicky in the first part. Up to this point, Vicky's backstory hasn't been made clear, but this conversation explains some of it. We learn about Vicky's schooling, and we see Barbara's mother-like characteristics and Barbara's interest. It wasn't Ian's best story. His subplot bored me. There's nothing much to say about the companions in this one. This story could have worked without companions. I'm scoring it 3.5 out of 10. The Doctor. William Hartnell is my second favourite Doctor, behind Peter Capaldi, and I think he's great. I like the first Doctor's development from a grumpy man to quite a kind person. In this story, I like his chemistry alongside Vicky, and I think it gets the best out of him, as William Hartnell always does his best acting when acting as a grandfather figure in Doctor Who. However, despite this, it wasn't his best story. In the first part, his excessive giggling got on my nerves, and in general, the limitations of the script didn't do his character justice, as he never had an outstanding moment. Nothing memorable for me. It hurts to say this, but I'm giving him 3 out of 10. The story. If you haven't watched the story, I will not be spoiling the ending. I'll just touch upon it briefly. After watching the previous great story, I was ready and raring for another trip out with the TARDIS crew. The opening didn't disappoint, as it gave us an intriguing mystery with the TARDIS crash landing, a mysterious force, TARDIS losing its power, and an eerie planet. By the end of the first part, Barbara was being controlled and Vicky was trapped in the TARDIS with it moving. The atmosphere was great, made by little touches of Ian losing his pen and the Doctor's confused state. However, after this peak in interest, ignoring a few great moments, the story's gradual decline began. The Web Planet does have pacing issues. Instead of a 6-part story, I think it should have been reduced to only 4 parts. The cliffhangers were the outstanding part of each story. The protagonist's plan to stop the Zarbi was quite confusing for me on first viewing, and it didn't make much more sense on second and third viewing. Or maybe I'm just not that clever. The end relies too much on coincidence. I wouldn't go as far as to say it was rushed, but it does have pacing issues. My favourite parts of the story that I haven't already mentioned was the Doctor's conversations with the head of the Zarbi. I think it looks like he's got a bowl on his head, and it made me laugh. The final part, where one of the Zarbi almost knocks over a flimsy looking set piece. And I like the bit with Ian's tie at the end. And I'm going to give the story a 6 out of 10. This was a strange story. It wasn't good, but I think it classifies as so bad that it's actually good. If it didn't take itself so seriously, I might even recommend it. After working out the mean of the scores for the story, villains, companions, and the Doctor, and rounding them to the nearest half, I give this story a 4.5 out of 10, meaning that it's half a point away from me recommending this to viewers. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will hopefully be making more of them in the future. I'm sorry about the quality of the audio being so poor, and stay safe. Thank you for watching.